Actually, I'm pretty sure that was my fault. I've got something in my voice. It's cracking. I'm throwing all the bases off. That was me, guys. That's not Dean. I was so sorry. Uh, I think on the screen here we have that's a diagram of the camp of Israel. Now, the way I believe this is correct, I don't see any other way to arrange it. I know sometimes you get this big impression that these guys were all in a big square block, but actually, according to the instructions, that wouldn't have worked. Okay, so I think this is the only way, the instruction that God gave the children of Israel to lay out the camp. I think it's the only way that it would work. You notice it's from the air, it would look like a big cross. But that's in these areas out to the southwest and northwest, southeast and northeast, that would all be vacant actually, because they were instructed to camp north, south, east, and west of the camp of the Levites of the tabernacle, and this is the only way to do it. Anyway, when the Jews left the Egypt, they had roughly 600,000 fighting men. These are guys between the ages of 20 and 60 who are able to fight. Okay, and that's not counting the Levites. All right, they weren't counted in this census. And so, in addition, they had other people. It mentioned specifically there were other people that went out of Egypt with them. So, so if you extrapolate, then what happened was you have roughly 3 million people walking out of Egypt out into the desert. See? Now, that's so the Levites themselves. Well, anyway, it didn't matter about the Levites anyway. And so if you count in the Levites, we have to extrapolate the Levites in there too. And so if you have 6 people in the average household, see that gives you, that gives you 38,500 tents. Okay, and so if you have roughly 50, you put out a tent, you got your family there, you're going to need, when you're crowded, you still need 15 feet of space for a tent. You got to have that much just to get around the thing and work on it and like that, and then cook and that sort of thing. And so that gives you about 196 tents on a side. Now I'm talking about a single block like Levi, and the next, and the next Levi was Judah, and so on out that. So you actually had 3 tribes in each direction. Okay, so each tribe then would be about 3,000 feet on a side. Okay? And that's no less than 6/10 of a mile for an average camp. See, if you line them all up, you'd have no less than 8 miles of tents. 3,000 feet wide, 3/5 of a mile wide, and 8,000 feet. So you got nearly 2 miles. So anyway, 8 miles of tents. Anyway, it could be smaller. It'd be hard to compact things any more than that. It could be, but likely that was even bigger than that. See, now the camp layout actually makes sense, according to Scripture. See, if by the way, the camp layout was in Leviticus 2, so you can read it if you want to. Anyway, the tribes were to camp in the cardinal directions from the tabernacle, and so in order to do that, they have to be lined up one after another. And it also makes sense, for instance, because these guys, see, they had a lot of cattle, a lot of sheep, a lot of goats, stuff like that. They weren't just people. They had a lot of possessions. And so that particular layout then gives them between each of the arms of the camp, about 3 square miles of grazing land. And you can see, because the arms are stretched out this way, that the cattle, the herds, could be watched from 2 angles. In other words, all the way to the back side. So if you kept them within those arms, see, about 3 square miles, then they would be guarded on 2 sides, and they'd still be able to see all the way out. Each arm would be able, right at the very end, would be able to completely enclose your herds with vision. You could see everywhere. Okay, this way. So that makes sense. So now you have some logistics here that I would just want to point out, okay, just to give you a feel for what actually happened out there in the desert. See, if each tent had a single oil lamp, one of those little Aladdin lamp kind of things that you put olive oil in, and so you wouldn't have to do this really, because we had the fiery pillar, right? So, but anyway, but if they did, if they needed to light their oil lamps for any reason, and every housewife filled the oil lamp in the evening, and each lamp spilled a single drop of oil, that camp would have lost 18 gallons of oil by spillage, just a single drop. This is a lot. A small beef cow these days, it needs about 9 gallons of water a day. A cow that's nursing needs twice that. Assuming that they had smaller cows than we have here in America, they probably did. An average of 10 gallons of water per cow, that's not unreasonable. Assuming that one cow per family unit, that would make about 38,000 heads of beef. And they needed 380,000 gallons of water per day. And they had sheep and goats too. See, I'm not even including them. I don't know how you'd count those, but they're there. It mentions them specifically. And well, in the Ten Commandments, they had ducks. I don't know. They had, but that's, what I mean. The little girls scooting along the ducks with their stick. They had their cat. They had their possessions. They left with everything. Plus, they left with a bunch of stuff from the Egyptians too. They remember all that. They borrowed stuff from the Egyptians and kept it. Anyway, the total water intake, for the entire camp, it had to be far in excess of 3.5 million gallons of water each and every day. Where are you going to get that? Now, I have a 2,000-gallon water storage we have on the property. Okay, one of these every minute wouldn't have been enough. It just, it wouldn't have been enough water. See, if you had a 2.5-inch fire hose at 275 pounds pressure, and this thing's squirting out full bore, it can deliver a maximum of 300 gallons per minute. The camp would die of thirst if they had to drink out of that fire hose. See, the whole United States, to give you a better picture of it, there's only 2 cities that have more people than this camp today. That's New York and Los Angeles. All the rest, even San Francisco, only had 865,000. According to what I read, I take their word for it, a census. 865,000 San Francisco. 3 times bigger than San Francisco. Camped out in the wilderness. Now, see, what I'm trying to get at is the sheer horrendous magnitude of the logistical problem of such a mass movement of people. Now, what I'm saying is that it can't be done. It's impossible. Okay? Pharaoh of Egypt, he was an experienced military man. See, and he had to have laughed his head off. You 3 million people, you guys going to head out in the desert? That is so stupid. You're all going to die. And he would have been right. He would have been right. They shouldn't have lived. Shouldn't have been able to. Napoleon, I heard once say that, I heard that he said that an army marches on its belly. He's talking about logistics. How do you feed 3 million people in the desert? Now, it wasn't, the climate was different too. Don't think for a second that it was all, just rocks and sand like we see it today. It wasn't that way. It was grassland. It's savanna, like that. There was stuff out there for the cattle. But water wasn't everywhere either. In the Second World War, there was the U.S. Army. See, we were the envy of all the other Allied armies, and one British general, he really complained that the Americans, they didn't fight fair. They didn't march anywhere. They rode everywhere. Deuce and a half trucks and like that. He said that they don't set up camp. What happens is when they stop, they set up a whole town. They've got grocery stores, PXs, they have laundries, they have entertainment, they got a movie play, they have a movie tent. I was in the military. Yeah, you do. That's right. You're not going to go anywhere without your movie screens and all that, That's how the United States fights. Everybody else is looking at us going, oh, you wimps. Deuce and a halves. I mean, that was how we moved everything, deuce and a half trucks. And the children of Israel, they had to have a very good supply master, and they did. They did. So they had to have one, because they should have all died, every one of them, to a man out there in the desert. You can't hunt that kind of food. You can't bring that kind. You can't transport that kind of food. You can't do anything to supply that kind of a mass of humanity. It was impossible. So here's the camp. Okay, still up there. Think. In the exact center, there's the tabernacle, the altar of burnt offering. Overhead, the pillar of cloud by day gives them shade, and by night, this pillar of fire that gives them light and security. And the sight of that had to have been terrifying to the enemies of Israel, to the people whose lands they were moving through. You know, who'd want to attack that kind of thing? A camp like that, 3 million people with a God that keeps a pillar of fire burning in the middle of the camp. And, you know, it was King Balak. He was scared to death. So he tried to hire Balaam to curse them, you know, another prophet of God. Didn't work out, but he tried. And so, you know, so for a few days or weeks, see, this pillar of fire would rest, you know, however long God decided they need to stay there. And then after a while, that pillar of cloud or fire, whichever, but cloud probably, would, because it would be in the daylight, see, so that would begin to move. And so when that pillar of cloud began to move, then the Levites would pack up the tent, they'd break it all down, pack it up, get it ready to move, and they would start following along after that cloud. Okay, got time to go. And then everybody else would do exactly the same thing, the whole camp, see? And don't think for a second they just up and started walking. These guys, they have possessions. They a lot of them. They had enough possessions to donate as a free will offering enough stuff to make a $57 million tent. Dude, I mean, you know, that's just current estimates. It's just an estimate. Probably I've heard even as high as $1 billion. I don't know, but a lot of money, okay, involved in that tabernacle. So they begin to move anyway. So just think, the third largest city in America packs up all their stuff, puts it on wagons or shoulders or whatever, cows and everything, and they start moving out. Third largest city. We don't have a city, 2 cities bigger than that. Okay. And that brings us to the march, see, and there's more logistics involved in a march. Okay. See, logistics, that just means that what has to happen to deal with the problems associated with moving troops, moving people, see. And so there's certain realities that have to be dealt with. See, the column of the march has to be longer than 9 miles for several reasons, a lot longer. The first is just the shape of the land. See, it wasn't all flat like a table. It wasn't like that. It had hills and valleys and, you know, and terrain. It had terrain. They were marching through terrain. And you know that people, they're always going to try to go around the hills or between the hills. They don't want to take your stuff over the hill. That's the hard way. Everybody's going to try to go the easy way if they can. If 2 hills are close to each other, things get scrunched in, you know, and then they spread out again. So if there's valleys, going to constrict the width of the column. It's going to tell you, you know, how many people can go through it, you know, and that's going to stretch out the column, you know, to constrict it. Yeah, if any of you guys ever driven up to the ranch, you know that you don't like to be right behind the car in front of you because it gets dusty. Dust, see? And so, you know, now the tribe of Levi, they're up there in front. And so everything's all fresh and nice and, you know, they're just moving along. But, you know, 230,000 people or more with their cattle. They had cattle too, the Levites did. And so, you know, they chew up the ground pretty good. And then here comes Judah, and they chew up the ground more. And you know what it's like walking behind a herd of cattle, right? You know, a lot of little cow pies out there. You try to get around there. You don't want to walk there. So what happens is you spread out if you can. You you don't want to be too close because it's getting dusty. It's getting poopy. The grass is getting eaten on your way. And so you have to scout out. You got to get some water for your cattle and like that. So things get a little discombobulated. It has to be that way. That's the reality of moving. And the third problem would be weakness due to age or disease. People are going to die on this march. In fact, see, every man 20 years or older who left Egypt, except for Joshua and Caleb, they're going to die on this journey, including Moses, okay? That's probably, and their wives and their parents are going to die too, for the most part. And so that's probably more than a million and a half of this population are going to die, okay? That's about 108 people a day. They're dying while they're walking. They're going, and then so you have to do something with the body. Remember, Paul said, and their carcasses lay out in the desert. What did they do? Pile of rocks on them. You couldn't stop for a funeral. I mean, things are going. You can't quit. You can't stop. And the population, it doesn't actually increase during this journey. It always been back in Egypt, man, they were increasing like crazy. But on this journey, the end census that was taken 38 years later, it was about the same. That means it was rough out there. It wasn't easy. Manna, the water and all that, it was not an easy life. Okay. So anyway, there would have been about 108 births to replace the ones who had died. So every day you're in your cart or whatever, you're walking along, marching. All right, we got a pregnant lady with us. Is she going to carry that out here in the desert, walking along mile, after mile, or in a cart, and it's going to go, those things, they didn't have suspension. There were no highways. And now it's time to deliver. Hey, the most helpless time a lady can possibly have. What do? Well, better pull out to the side, better call the midwives, whatever, and deliver this kid. And meanwhile, the column, you're getting further behind because your tribe is still going. See, slowly, on, and you're behind. Okay. Now, I don't know how fast the pillar of cloud moved, but my dad told me that his dad told him, now, my granddad was a teamster. He was a freighter, and that doesn't mean he drove, Mack trucks or anything like that. He drove burros, and he hauled wagons. And he said that in a day, an 8-mile day was a good day. Pretty good traveling. If you could get 8 miles a day out of your burros. Now, what would be a day's march for a column like this? Maybe not that far. But it would be hard just the same. We don't know. See, so so here's like the very last tribe was Naphtali. And so the Levites, which are ahead, they get up to where they're going to, where their pillar stops, and they start setting up camp. Say, well, this column is miles long. And so Judah sets up its camp, and the next one next to him, and this poor tribe of Naphtali, he comes in late in the evening, maybe at night, who knows, and he sets up his camp. See what I mean? It was not an easy thing to do, okay? And so now at the very end of the column, you're going to have to use your imagination and all this stuff. At the very end of the column, way out, a long ways away from the camp, so you have those who are having a difficult delivery. The ladies couldn't, deliver easily, maybe breech birth or something. You have the people who are sick for one reason or another. You've got the old people who are dying and just couldn't keep up. You have miles out from the safety of the camp, you have the weakest, the sickest, the oldest, the ones who are the most helpless of all, see. And so evening, see, it starts closing down, it's getting dark and all that. And they could, that column of fire, I'm sure they could see it. It's way out there, but, that had to have been visible for miles. They might even been able to hear in the darkness the sound of the worship, because that would have been time for the evening oblation, the evening sacrifice. See? And so, but they're not up there. They're out here. And then the Amalekites come. See? See, they're just stragglers, one reason or another. But they had family, people that missed them, people that knew they were gone. Okay? And you know what? They were still part of the congregation of God. For as far back as they were still part of that congregation. And you know who missed them most of all? Listen to what God has to say. This is Exodus 17 and 16. For he said, because the Lord hath sworn that the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation. And in Deuteronomy 25, 17 through 19. I want you guys to remember what Amalek did unto thee by the way when you came out of Egypt. How he met thee by the way and smote the hindmost of thee, even all that were feeble behind thee when thou wast faint and weary. And he feared not God. Therefore, it shall be, when the Lord thy God hath given thee rest from all thine enemies round about, in the land where the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance to possess it, that thou shalt blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven, thou shalt not forget it. You're going to cut the tree down. You're going to burn the stump. You're going to sift the ashes until you have destroyed every single descendant of Amalek from the face of the earth. That's how mad God was. 4 centuries later, he hadn't forgotten. He was still mad. Look what he tells Saul. For thus saith the Lord of hosts, I remember. Whether or not you remember, I do. I remember what happened. I remember that which Amalek did to Israel. How he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now, I want you to go and smite Amalek. It's time. Utterly destroy all that they have. Don't spare them at all. You slay man and you kill all the women. You kill the infants, the sucklings, the ox, the sheep, the camel, and the ass. You destroy everything until nothing is left of Amalek at all. He's still mad. Now, the point is, see, no matter how far outside the camp, out in the darkness, the weakest were still Israel. Those guys were still Israel. Now, I've got an observation to make here. They were 600,000 fighting men in the camp of Israel. So the obvious question is, why wasn't there a rear guard? See? It's obvious. It's easy. Put a rear guard out there. Protect the people. Protect the weakest, see? They knew they were back there. They told, we're going to have to pull over for a bit. You guys save us a good camping spot. We'll be in later on tonight. But they didn't. They never made it. See? The most obvious thing in the world to do wasn't done. See? You make sure that the weakest among you don't get left behind. That's obvious. You send a guard. Send a guard. Now, as far as I know, I could be wrong on this, but I've never read any place where God suggested to Moses, set a guard out. And I wonder why not. It's an obvious thing to do. The thing of it is that it's so obvious that the omission has to have been deliberate. See, for a reason. for a spiritual reason, for an example, or for a type, a picture. You remember, sometimes it's what's not there that's important. Remember Adam seeking, all looking through all the animals and naming them, going, what was the obvious question? Where's Eve? I don't have an Eve. That was obvious, right? God didn't forget, though. God was saying something with that absence. He was pointing out something. And this is that too. This is a picture of the weakness of the law. The law can't, and it never could provide a rear guard. It can't. See, the law, it spares only those who do all its commands. That's all it can do. In Leviticus 18:5, ye shall therefore keep my statutes. That's right. And my judgment. That is correct. Which if a man do, if you do it, he shall live in them. I am the Lord. And the inference is obvious. If you don't do it, you won't live. It makes sense. Thing is, see, the marching order, that was a command of God too. That was the law. The marching order was the law also. It's no less than the 10 Commandments. Camping in your proper spot around the pillar of fire, it was a command. And to fall out of the order, to leave, to stop, and to be abandoned by the camp, that's a failure to obey. We don't see it that way because we're all tenderhearted, but it is just the same. The law only protects those who are obedient to it, those who are near the fiery pillar. Which, if a man do, he shall live. See, which of these people weren't? They weren't. So while the camp of the children of Israel, see, they assembled themselves all in light and safety, those outside were simply abandoned to the Amalekites because the law has no strength, no power to save those outside the law. But we're not the law, are we? We're not of the camp that's protected only by obedience to the law. We are the grace of the blood of Jesus. We're the flesh and bone of the bridegroom redeemer. And we wield a power far greater than the power of the law. And we can reach back farther than the law could reach. We have a power that can reach back to the very weakest. See, and this is why I preach this way, because we're looking at the end of the column. We're looking back there. We're saved. I don't have to preach, salvation to you guys. I don't have to preach security to you guys. You're here. The Holy Spirit's here. The column of fire's here. Here's where we are. They should be with us. But they're not. They're out in the darkness, a long ways away. Right? But we have a power. We have an ability to provide a rear guard of protection. A protection and assurance that's simply not possible by the law. See, every time we gather and worship, see, here we are, the Spirit of Christ. We enter into the light. But what about those guys? See, those who sit outside in darkness, who are convinced. See, they're convinced by this time. They have no place in the camp of the saints because they know they're outside what God wants them to be doing. They understand that. They know. Through weakness, whatever, But we have the power to reach these people. It takes a certain amount of boldness, though, to exercise that power. If we could convince ourselves, and I'm going to, I promise I'm trying myself. It's hard because, people a lot of times they're so embarrassed and afraid of God, they don't even want to talk. They're scared. And sometimes you have to press. And that's what I'm saying. I think that we need to pry and we need to press. We need to ask the question, look, as far out as you are, do you still at all believe that Jesus is truly the Son of God? That's a powerful question. It'll separate. It's a separating question. It separates those who are only very weak from those who are truly dead. Okay? Those who believe in Christ, no matter how faintly, they're not going to be able to claim that they don't believe in Jesus. They will. They'll still fess. And those who deny Christ, they're dead. Okay, we just have to accept that. And so if you do manage to find a spark of faith, and to find that spark, you have to ask. You got to pry. If you do find the least hope of Christ, see, you can announce with boldness, because we know. We can, with power. You ain't dead yet. You only think you're dead. Yeah, you're a long ways out of the will of God. That's true. But you're not dead. We're the rear guard. We're here to help. We're here to get you along, to protect you from the darkness. You're in danger, no doubt about that. You're out in the dark. But we're here too. We can reach that far. It's easy. The gospel isn't just here. The gospel is wherever we go to provide protection for those of our number who should be here and are not. Okay? But you got to pry. You got to ask. We got to start asking. Remember back when we were discussing housing the homeless, we wondered, how are we going to make things work? We were confused. I remember that, and then somebody said, you mean provide a potluck? And all of a sudden everything lightens up. We go, oh, of course, we know how to do potlucks. We can do that. Well, this is like that. See, we can do this too. We can do this. But you gotta corral your or to get somebody else to help you corral your wayward folks. I'm gonna do that to my sister Rhoda as soon as she shows up. Do you believe she claimed to be a Christian a long time ago? And I haven't asked her since then. That's a mistake on my part. I'm gonna ask her, do you still claim Christ at all? Then why aren't you in church? No, I'm gonna be that mean. But anyway, you know what I mean? Let's start. Let's come back. Even if, you can talk them into coming back once a year, maybe once a month, maybe even twice a month. You know what I mean? To just bring them forward to the camp, if at all possible. Okay? You ain't dead yet. That's the point. You need a rear guard. And when you need someone to remember your name in prayer, that's us. When, you need somebody to help you take a step, that's us. 1, 2, 3, maybe. We should be the rear guard that the weakest of the children of Israel never had. Okay? That the law could not provide. But the good news, see, of the mercy of Christ is that's infinitely more powerful than the law ever could be. So it's time for the invitation then. Now we're all saved. We're all Christians here. We're all gathered around that fiery pillar of the Spirit. Just because I can't see it doesn't mean I don't know He's here. He's here. We know that. But this time, let's think about the God of the rear guard, the God that didn't have the tool at the time to provide a rear guard for the weakest. But He does now, and that's us. Okay, team?